So everyone, welcome. So glad to be here. This is our third and final gathering of the authors from Story from the Muses, which is this fabulous compilation of books published a few months ago. And we're going to be in conversation with 5 of the authors today: Jennie Linthorst, Sharon Strimling, Neha N.Vyas, Sam Herman, and Maria Iliffe-Wood. For those of you who haven't bought the book, it is available on Amazon, so please consider buying a copy. There's Maria beautifully modeling it. And also, if you have read a copy and you are so moved, we'd love an Amazon review. So please feel free to post those as well. During our conversation, I have some questions ready for the writers, but if you have any questions in particular, please ping JB Hollows, and she will get those questions to me as we go. Excellent. Thanks, JB. All right, so we're going to get started, and our first author we're going to be speaking with is Jennie. Hi, Jennie.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
It's great to be here with everyone.
Yeah. So I had a question about the pieces in the book, because all of your pieces are one whole piece, no paragraphs or those line breaks. Can you tell us how you determine the structure of your pieces?
Yes. So I have a process. Mostly I write poetry and publish poetry. So while I have been taking these levels of method writing, this is my second time going through method writing, this time with a different teacher, with Jules. And I really wanted to expand my voice and experiment writing longer sentences, which is more like prose. And instead of, just having the poem be so concise with the line breaks and the stanzas. And when it came time to take my Muse pieces and begin the editing process to submit for the manuscript, I went my usual route of contacting my editing team. So I go to my first former teacher, who is my first eyes on my pieces, and she knows my writing very well. And it was interesting when I first read them to her, I had them broken up more like an essay would be in paragraph form. And she said to me, Jennie, these are prose poems, meaning you can do one big block of writing where you don't break the lines or break them into stanzas, and that's considered a prose poem. It's mostly looked at, through length of the piece, but also, is it reading with the poetics? And it's my first time publishing what I would call prose pieces, prose poems. So it looks like one big block. And you also see prose poems where there's one big block of, I guess, would be a stanza with no line breaks, and then one break and another block. Those are just, they're longer sentences. They don't read like what you usually see in a shorter poem. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and my question's a little twofold. How do you feel the experience is different for your audience dealing with one of your prose poems with these longer things versus what is probably what you normally do, which would be more stanza? How do you think that changes the experience for the reader?
I think for the reader, with longer prose sentences and prose poems, you add more breadth to what you're able to express to your reader. So your reader has longer time in a sentence, longer time in a section without pausing, without the line break. And I'm able, as the writer, to expand what I'm writing about. It's just not as concise. And it allowed me to really expand upon how the muse was moving through what I was trying to say.
Oh, I love that. So it's almost as like, am I hearing it correctly that sometimes when you're like dealing with stanzas, etc., there's almost a little restraint to kind of be like concise as you said, and this is a little more freeing, it sounds like.
Yes, absolutely. And very different for me. I am so trained. Poems are so concise. Every word matters. Every line break matters. What word you have at the end of a line versus which word you start at the, and when I help edit other people, it's very much about teaching that you want to cut all the fat. I mean, we want to do that with all our prose pieces too, but every word matters in a poem. And elevating that image or that abstract, if you're talking about an abstract like sadness, it has to be elevated into an image or with a comparison, a metaphor, simile. In method writing, it would be more of the surreal and lost world, and how can you elevate that so that every single word is capturing the heart of what you're trying to get across.
So what's it like for you now that you've created this body of work with, I keep using the word restraint, but with a little more letting loose and not being so, particular? Have you seen kind of different things come out because you haven't been so tied to that other structure?
Yeah, and what I love about taking the method writing classes is you have that freedom to write those 2 pages and in whatever exercise you're doing. And in the Muses, there was lots more freedom as to where those 2 pages were going to take you following that muse energy. So I love that longer first write, and then being able to go back and pull out what used to be always a poem. And not necessarily a prose poem. So it's frightening for me because it's new to be writing more like essays. And that's kind of what I feel like I now have, a combination of some personal essays, some prose poems, and some just straight up poems. And being able to allow my voice to grow into that. And it's just been a real fun experiment to allow that much writing to come out. But I'm such an editor of like cutting and elevating. And so, but it's giving me more freedom for sure. And the Muses took me, this is the second time I've done the Muses. And this time I'm always amazed at the depth of material that is inside us when we access a Muse energy.
And I love how it kind of is, it's a continuum. So it's like you've done it before, but now you're doing it again. And it sounds like something new was revealed and opened. And I loved how you said personal essays, because I was thinking that's almost like the next iteration from a prose poem to personal essays. So I love how, even though you're an established poet, you are still learning and growing and finding new mediums for your art.
Yeah, definitely. And, it was interesting this time with the Muses. The first time I did it, I mean, this was like 20 years ago. That teacher, Stella Suley, who was my first method writing teacher, very much was to the book of, don't write, like if you're doing the Mother Muse, don't write about being a mother. She really wanted it to be just access the energy, but continue to write whatever you were writing about, and how does that change it? And we do that in Jules' classes too. But I chose this time, and I kind of broke my rule, I think, in some ways, in that I wanted to see, where do these muses live in my life right now? And so they became very personal pieces, where that muse inspired, how was it moving through me right now? The Virgin Muse, how was that moving through me during the pandemic and the lockdown? And that piece, so it opened my eyes to all the different aspects of myself, and I just chose to be brutally honest and let that writing take me where it took me.
I love it, and it shows, and it's new. It's different.
Yeah, it is very different.
Which is awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Jennie.
Thank you.
Sharon, hello there. So,
Hello.
hi, how are you? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. I love being with y'all.
So, rumor has it that you did quite a lot of editing of your pieces
All
before
right,
you
who
were happy
edited?
with the final versions. This is like how the sausage was made. This is like the behind the scenes of the book.
Right. Oh my
So,
gosh, I got so much support. And yes, I spent forever with those pieces. Yeah.
so tell us about that experience of kind of when you first said, okay, I'm going to do it, and then the iterations of the refining to the finished product.
That's a good question. There were so many moments, but and I can't remember where I started. I think I answered with a yes because so much of my writing has been and continues to be about freeing the voice and speaking even when you're afraid to, and writing even and showing even when you're afraid to show. And I had all of that going on. But it feels like um, there's a very important or like salient thing to that for me right now. That feels like a part of what's happening in my life. So the answer was yes. And then it went to, oh no. No way, right? Like the um Jules is so good with this work. This was very much about doing exercises. So I had to look at my pieces and say, okay, these are exercises. Some of them felt like things that I wanted to put out in the world, and others felt like what they were, which were exercises. And I did stay true to that. But there was a big voice in me that said, if you're going to go and put your work out in the world, you want it to be like your best work, the pieces you love most. Well, the muse, the muse pieces were the most challenging. That was the most challenging class for me.
Mm.
And some of them flowed and some of them felt like really stilted, and I worked hard at them. And so I had a lot going on in bringing these out into the world. And I think that the editing process for me was a mixture of self-consciousness, but also crafting an art and having the time and the support to do that it was a really cool process. I did reach out for a lot of support, and it was interesting to take in feedback and weigh it, and then take in feedback from somebody else and weigh it. And in the end, I did come back. I took on some feedback, shifted things, and then in the end, there was a moment where I came back to, actually, no, I'm going to do it this way, or yes,
Mm.
and it all came from what felt like this writer's space. So, yeah, I
Well,
don't.
I love that because you said, I believe you said a little bit of like the process was a little bit of like self-conscious where you're like asking people for feedback, but it
Yeah,
sounds like your inner wisdom knew at the end. Like
yeah.
you're your own best editor.
Um, yes, I think, how would I put it? No, I think what I would say is that um, everything I received from other people taught me something.
Mm.
And as I learned, my writing would move in a direction, but it had to come back home. And I think
Mm.
in the end, my pieces did integrate everything I learned from each person and from what they were seeing. But there were some last minute changes. There were a lot of last minute changes that were final, and then they were final and they were final. But in the end, it was so important to me. I mean, I made a big deal out of this, and it
It
was
is
so
a big
important.
deal, though. It is a big deal to put your work out into the world. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
What's it like? We always talk about process versus product. And so you talked about these muse pieces, a lot of them were process.
yeah,
And it sounds like you went through a different process to get them into product. What
yeah.
was it like for you when you looked at those pieces with a different eye? Maybe instead of an eye from, I'm going to
Yes.
read this in class this week, to this is going to be in a book. What was that experience like?
Well, what's really interesting, I learned something about myself as a writer, which is that I hear my pieces. And they come through with sound and with rhythm. And in class, we read them out loud. I didn't intend to make, they all pretty much look like poetry. I don't know if they are officially put, but they all look like poetry. And I was really relating to what Jennie was saying, and Jennie was super helpful to me. The culling every word, and I just really related to that process. But in my head, they just were sound and rhythm. And so when I put them on the page, it was like, how do I get this to have my voice on the page? And they turned into poetry because I was able to kind of slow down and give rhythm with my line breaks. I think some of them started that way, like as I wrote, the pauses would bring me to the next line. But some of them were really written as one piece, and I had to break it up that way in order to bring the rhythm in. But I found that was one of the most difficult things for me, Jamie, was that they didn't feel the same on paper as they did coming from me orally. And I wondered if my writing is more of an oral experience, more of a vocal experience.
So now that you see the pieces in this like real deal bound book,
yeah,
did you experience, like, did you read them to yourself, or did you have someone read them aloud? Were you able to kind of get that new experience from it?
I think, well, what do you mean by that new experience?
Well, you said that for you feel like it's an oral experience, like you speaking out the word, right? And it's an experience in class where you hear yourself speaking and then other people are hearing you speak.
Yeah.
So now that you see these beautiful words on this page, did you read them aloud, or when you read them, did you have a different experience? Because it's visual.
Yeah, I think it's as close as I can get. I think the way that they look, I think it's as close as I could get. And it took some, I think it was maybe talking to Neha, she read some of them back to me. And that was really cool to hear, like, if you see this in print, how would you read it? Where would the pauses be? Like, how would it sound? So that was really helpful to me. But I realized I have no idea how people are going to read it. Everybody's going to read it through their own experience, and some of them are going to scan it and some of them are going to take it really slowly. And that's just a letting go process. It'll be what it is. But I think that like there was one place where I had more frequent line breaks and it carried a certain energy, and then another section that was broken up in odd places and one line after another, because I wanted it to feel sort of chaotic and a little bit faster and different. I don't know if people hear it that way, but it was it was fun to do.
And what was it like to hear your words out of someone else's mouth when Neha read them?
That was cool. I have to say, what was it like? I remember being kind of touched by it. I think when I was listening for, is this working the way I wrote it? But now as I remember it, it was lovely. It was lovely to hear it move through somebody else's system.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that experience for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And speaking of Neha, hello. And how are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to be here with everyone.
It's so nice to have you. So going back to a year ago, when we first started talking about this book coming into the world, it seemed like you had some strong feelings about maybe being anonymous with your work.
That's true.
Yeah.
Good memory.
What's that?
I said good memory.
Yeah. So I wanted to just kind of, it's a year later, you didn't, your name is printed on the book. So what changed?
So it's interesting. I'm really glad I didn't go anonymous. And part of that is because that means I can participate on something like this. Because had I gone anonymous, there's a whole part of this that wouldn't exist for me in a personal experience. I think going through the collaboration process of editing was so fun for me over the summer. And it was a whole different aspect to, there's the writing in class, there's the moving, there's the yes to publication, there was the now playing with the pieces. And as Jennie was saying, for me, I had a process of really cutting a lot, and I loved doing that. Like, it was like sculpting pieces into the least possible amount. And I felt like they got stronger by cutting so much out of it, because I did not write them as poems, but the majority of them in the book are poems. And I think the anonymous thing came through in that process. I couldn't tell you though, honestly, it wasn't a head decision. I think the anonymous part is because Jules's class, so I also worked with Jennie's teacher, Stella Sue, and did Muses did method writing through the Muses in a one-on-one setting. So I would send her my pieces, she'd look at them, and we'd talk about them. I think I read them out loud to her, but Jules's class was the first experience in a group setting where I was sharing my work, period. Like, I've been very closeted with my writing because it's been so precious to me from, well, I don't know when I started writing, as a teenager. It's how I made sense of the world. Oh, did I lose you? Okay, I thought I lost you.
Oh, no.
So I think it was just walking myself through the process. Even saying yes to, okay, I'm going to submit them, was a step, and anonymous felt safer. And then it's like, it just happened. Honestly, I couldn't even tell you, there was no moment of, okay, I'll put my name on it. It's like, my name's on it, you know?
And so how do you feel now?
I'm glad, like I said, especially about this participation, because otherwise I think I would have felt very left out. It would be like everyone else is doing all this. I think I would have felt left out. Yeah, it feels, this whole process after publication for me has been, each step has been a growth process. And after publication has been a big growth process too, of coming out of my shell. But so it's happening without my doing much with it, if that makes sense. But like, just showing up with each step and dealing with whatever nervousness, fears, discomfort comes up in the process.
Tell me more, if you will, about kind of coming out of your shell. So the book comes out in May. In terms of like interaction with others, like what kind of experiences did you have?
So I think I still haven't told my family. I think my husband knows, but none of my family knows that there's something still I'm very slow in sharing it. We had marketing weeks, each of us, of like putting the word out there. And those, again, all of this has been positive steps forward. And I'd send emails out to closer friends, and then I'd send another email out with a larger group. And then I never used social media, but I took the chance and stuck it on there. And if 9 people saw it, 9 people saw it, that kind of thing. So it's been, I'm grateful for it, to be honest. I'm not sure if anything else could have gotten me to this space. And next time will be a little easier, and the next time will be a little, that's kind of how I see it. And this was such a safe way to do it, with a group of people that I love, with a group of people that I admire, and through classes. One of the things beyond just writing, I think I've learned so much from, yes, the sharing of the experience of, as Sharon was saying, speaking our words out in class, but also listening to everyone's work. I've learned immense amounts and heard each person's unique voice. And I think that also helps in getting, for me, not being as precious, like not having the comparison thing go on, because it's so unique, each of our voices. And you can see that in the book, right? How the Muse energy moves through each of us, and what our style, our voice. I think it's, it's a liberating experience through class and thereafter, to just own our own voice. And but that for me happened through the process of admiring so many others.
Mm.
If that makes
So
sense.
it's interesting because you kind of talk about being a kind of teenager, writing in your own, maybe your journal in your bedroom, to then studying, but have it be a one-on-one thing, to now be in community with other writers. And there's this kind of almost organic where you're slowly taking these steps outward. So it sounds like it's really not only a very personal thing for you, always has been, but really it's this community that's kind of wind at your back, pushing you forward.
Absolutely. Like very held in the process.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. And so given your experience with this first book, like what's your view on putting more work out there to the world in the future?
I think I'm, again, like you said about this whole process being organic, it feels like that's inevitable without forcing any of it. But I do feel more excited about that prospect. I feel, right, a lot of the layers or the obstacles, defenses that were in place have come down, and it doesn't feel like as big of a thing, which is actually a positive, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, this is what I need to do this. All the pressure is dropped off. And I feel like there's more freedom into, well, why not? What, what does it have to do with me in the end anyway, right? All of that preciousness is more my own self, ego stuff and fear, etc. Versus, as I think Sharon said it, when she heard her piece through my voice, it's like once we let our stuff out into the world, it's not mine anymore. How someone reads that piece, like art, I've always thought about it with paintings, so much easier. It's like each person's going to see whatever they see. Same with the work in the world. Like I remember even in the submission process, one of the pieces I despised the most, like I didn't like it at all, is one of the ones that got picked. And it's in the book and has, and it's like, so yeah, so it's an interesting thing to just let it go.
I love that because Sharon even mentioned it, almost like the offering without attachment, right? It's like it's art, it's being offered, and you can't control how it's consumed.
With a great deal of care and love in the process. Like again, with that whole collaboration, for me, that editing process was one of my favorite things in doing this. It brought my pieces to life. I got to get involved with other people's pieces and them. Like I think friendships that were already there deepened in the process. It was just, that was one of my favorite things about this collaboration.
I love that because as writers, it could be almost like the nightmare process. So to hear that it's like a positive thing is amazing.
Oh, it was so fun. From doing it myself, from working with others and their pieces, my pieces. And like Sharon said, it's like I receive the feedback, but then it's also in the end, what do I choose to do with it? And that's right. It's like, it was so exactly, because a writer's world could be very solitary, but from our classes together to the collaboration on this project, to collaboration on editing, to all the way to this, where we're doing this all, it hasn't been at all.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Neha.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you all.
Sam.
Hello there.
How are you?
I'm good. Very happy to be here.
Good to have you.
Rid of the horrible COVID, so I get my slot. That's nice.
I'm so glad you're able to join us for this last one. So I wanted to talk about your feelings, and it's kind of a similar thread of how we left off with Neha, but the vulnerability you may have felt with putting your work out into the world.
Yeah, that's been an interesting journey, and I think it's ongoing. I've been listening to what everybody says, and it's so interesting to hear Jennie, who I have had the great joy of being in class with loads, and I just think she's a consummate professional, and I'm like, wow, how could I get to that stage of just handing over, editing, and then what Sharon was saying, and it was almost like birthing pieces and using voice, and then Neha kind of like stepping out of the shadows into ownership. And I can see aspects of all of those things really in my journey with this. So I would be lying to say that I don't still feel a level of vulnerability. And I mean, I kind of like jumped in. That's my way in the world, is I don't consider it's like, if I'm really scared, okay, I'm gonna do it. Boof, and I kind of jumped myself in, and I'm really, really pleased I did. And obviously there's been this parachute that's held me. So that's just been remarkable to have had that. You know, I think if I would have really stopped and thought about how dear and how personal these pieces are to me, and then having them out on a page, I might have had to go down a slightly different route with it. So I'm pleased I didn't do that. And I think, you know, just being human makes us vulnerable, really, at the end of the day. So, you know, when my wiser self comes out, it's like, it's okay to feel a bit exposed, and it's all part of this human journey. And I think there are things that I've revealed in those pieces that actually it's quite nice. It's like, yeah, let's just let it go, and it's out there, and people will make of it and take from it what they want.
Well, it's that, again, it's that feeling of unattachment. And I think we can all agree our stories are more similar than different.
Completely. That
being said, though, not everyone puts their stories in a published book, right? So it's like, it's definitely a big step to do. What was reactions to people? Did you get any feedback from people?
So yeah, I've had some, and it's interesting. So I took some copies and I've handed them around. So I've had some fab feedback, particularly a couple of friends of mine who have always heard me say, I'm off to my writing course, but they didn't really know what I was doing. And then they're like, wow, that's what you were doing. Was that you? Did you do that all by yourself? So that's kind of been the most positive. From other people who I think have been, there was one person I'm thinking about in particular who was a little bit embarrassed about some of my content. And that was quite an interesting exchange, because I thought, gosh, well, that's really nothing to do with me. So that was yet another time of being able to really let go and just like, you know, I don't want to live in embarrassment about my experiences. And in a way, I kind of thought, gosh, and if she was really that embarrassed, then I must have done quite a good job of putting it on the page, because there was such a reaction there. So I kind of did a 360 with it.
No, that's right. That's right. It sounds like something really resonated there to have that reaction. You know, looking back now that we're like over 2 months in, how do you feel about the fact that you just kind of jumped in?
I think I'd like to take a bit more care next time. I'm very hopeful. I'm pretty sure there will be a next time. You know, for me, it's also a learning experience, and seeing what I do with my sensitivity. And sometimes I think I feel so sensitive that I have to plunge. Otherwise, it's a little bit excruciating. And really recognizing that that's my way in the world. And but I think as I know that more, then it will become less of a hindrance. You know, I'm really, first of all, I'm just incredibly grateful to have been part of the process and for all the support in the process. And I'm kind of grateful to myself for saying, come on, we can do this, and doing that whole jump in.
And so what could be next for you in terms of writing?
Very good question. I've spent the last few weeks thinking about that a whole lot. I think it's going to be a kind of a fusion piece. I have this I went into this really because I wanted to speak about my sister. I wanted to tell her story and what had happened to her. But somewhere along the line, that's kind of merged with what happens when we don't listen to our spiritual lessons and our deeper instinct about life. that also then combines with characters, because one of the things that really came to me, particularly in the Muses, but really through the whole process of this learning journey, is how parts of characters become inflamed and other parts shrink. And so I'm kind of interested in character and how that plays into the story as well. Yeah, I'm setting myself a bit of a challenge here, but
no, I love that. I love that. I love that. And I love how all the experiences up to this point have like informed that, you know, that taking that plunge is now kind of getting you to think about a lot of different things.
Yeah, I will be forever grateful.
Really. And I also love how you're open to creative genius in that, you know, I think many people start writing courses because they want this product. I'm going to write about this. But yet when you see all the possibilities, it like morphs into something else and you're open to those changes.
Completely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is all about creative genius, and it's what wants to flow through. And there was something else I was listening to, Elizabeth Gilbert, and she one of the things she said was like, you know, you get your little shot of magic, and if you don't pick that magic up, it's going somewhere else. It wants to land. And I really feel that. I feel that quite profoundly, actually, that if I open myself up to it, something will land. But my job in it is to not get in the way.
And when you see it, grab it and do something with it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go to someone else, right?
Big time. Yes. Yeah.
I love that
one.
I love that, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, last but not least, Ria, it's nice that you can be in the hot seat for once.
It's I tell you what's been really lovely, Jamie. It's like not having to manage anything in the background and being able to really listen to everybody in the moment. And it's just been stunning, absolutely stunning.
Oh my gosh. And so it's nice to have you here as a participant and not the conductor. So we were talking earlier about your history with method writing, and that you actually did the Muse level twice. You were one of the first people to do it, period, with Jules. You were solo by yourself. And then you, maybe a level or two later, jumped in and did it with some writing colleagues. So what was it like doing the Muse level on your own and then doing it in community with others?
So, because I was one of Jules's first students, so that's about 4 years ago or so, something like that. And so there was a group of, I think, 5 or 6 of us in the very first class. And then when I went on to the next level, I can't remember what happened. And I can't remember what stage it happened, but very early on in doing the method writing with Jules, it became that I was the only person at the level that I was at, right up to about, I can't remember what, Muses is level 4. I think there was about 3 more levels after that. So I was on my own the whole time. And so I was always writing on my own. And to be perfectly honest, my ego quite liked that, because I was like, you know, I'm a bit ahead of the game here, you know, ego. But what was also happening was seeing how it really felt to me like everybody else's writing was taking more leaps and bounds compared to my writing. It felt like my writing coming through that, and never really thought about it this way before at all. My writing kind of moved at a quite a steady pace, but it felt like other people's writing, being with other people in the group, was, you know, it was like going, my writing's here, and then suddenly it's here, and then suddenly it's here, whereas mine was felt like it was just taking small steps. And there was something about when I did the Muses the first time, I didn't really feel like I got it. There was something like the Muses were pretty scary to me the first time I did them, and I don't think I really let go in order to be able to find them. And so that was the level where, as I progressed to the next levels afterwards and seeing other Muse writing, before I could really see that people were accessing something that I hadn't accessed. Like I knew, I could feel it in everybody's pieces. Like, yeah, there's something in the Muses that I missed completely. It wasn't that the Muse writing that I did was bad or anything. It was just, yeah, I really knew that I'd missed something. And there was something about being in a level with other people in the same level that somehow draws something out in you. So when I did the Muses the second time, and I can't actually remember exactly who I did it. I think it was Linda Pritchard, and there might have been one other person. I can't remember exactly now. Was it you? Oh, it was you and Usha, wasn't it? Yeah. So there was 4 of us. Oh, God, yeah. And so can you imagine? You look at Neha's Muses in this book, and Linda's Muses in this book, and Usha's writing is amazing. Like their Muse writing, the first time around, like none of my Muse pieces in this book come from my first time doing the Muses, because the difference in them is so amazing. So doing the Muse level with those 3 other people, it somehow it brings something out, and it's not a competitive thing. It's not a competition, because it's not a comparison, but I don't know, there's just and we weren't doing the same music as each other every time. We were all doing different Muses. But there's definitely something about being in a group where a number of people are doing the same level. It kind of, I don't know, it draws something out. And I really felt like I found the Muses much more closely. And even some of them, like the first time I did the Muse, Jules talks about, and Jennie mentioned it earlier, about finding the Muse in your body. Like I kind of thought I'd found the Muse in my body, but like one of them, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it was like an inch behind where I thought it was the first time. And that inch behind made all the difference, like made a huge difference in terms of what the writing that came through. So there's definitely something about being, and now I wouldn't want to be doing a level on my own.
You know, it's interesting because I feel like the theme of community too, just coming up, whether it's editing partners or getting confidence from one another. It's almost like this energy that we're feeding off each other and giving off each other. So that's just beautiful. And so, you know, looking back, it seems like the Muses the second time around in community really like laser focused you onto it. Do you think you'd have a different experience if you did it again?
I think so, because it was really interesting hearing what Jennie said about wanting to know where the Muse was right here, right now. I thought, as she said that, there's something really struck me in that as being true. And I think I probably would, like, if I was to do that whole level again, I think it would be a different experience again. Because the other side of it is there are, like, some of the Muses have got more aspects. So if you think about a Siren Seductress whore, I think my Siren kind of came out because it's such a, I was really surprised at the Siren piece at how Lost World it was, because Lost World is not my way. But you know, Mahor, I don't think Mahor I found. Well, I think I found Mahor later when I was doing the poets, especially I've just done Alexis Rain Fancher. That's definitely brought out the whole side. Jenny's laughing. So yeah, there's different aspects to each of the muses as well. So I suspect very much doing them again would be a different experience. And my guess is that, you know, I don't see me ever stopping doing the method writing. So at some point I'm going to be doing all of these again for sure.
But I love that too, because, you know, Jenny had said like some of her Muse stuff was during COVID. So it's like, imagine, and then as everyone ages and has different experiences, it's almost like this gift that keeps on giving, that you don't know, you know, what you're going to experience.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of all of this, all of the method writing. Like the thing, what comes out of on the page is so often a surprise. So often.
So you talked about kind of accessing a muse while you were doing a study of Alexis Rose Fancher's poetry. So tell me more about that. Was that like intentional? Or did you approach that with, this would be a great way to explore the horror muse, or did it just happen?
No, I think it's only when I look back in hindsight that I realized what was coming out, because in like trying to write Alexis Rose Fancher was the scariest thing for me, like really, really scary. And what it did is, it's like, for me, it's like it's open doors, and it's like so many of the levels of open doors inside of me. And as I've progressed through and getting more, I'm more willing to open the doors, and I'm more willing to push them wide open, rather than, you know, just like I was doing before, just gently nudging at the door, just push it, open it a little bit, and then, you know, really having to, you know, to access something deeper. And I don't think I would have been able to do the Alexis poetry level without having done the Muses first. I don't
so
think
it really is another voice, another tool. Yeah. And you kind of like, one of the things about the method writing, like if people said to me, what would be one recommendation if you're going to do the method writing class, for me it's write regularly every week. Like, don't just do the exercise once, because in writing, I always aim to, I mean, I was really diligent. I was writing 7 days a week to start off with. It's probably down to maybe 4 or 5 now, but I still aim when I'm in class to do it at least 4 or 5 times, because something happens in doing it doing the exercise. You know, like Sharon was saying, you do the exercise, and in doing the exercise over and over, it kind of puts something into your bones, that you, because you've done the exercise on a regular basis, then when you need it, like when I was doing Alexis Rose Fancher, I wasn't thinking about accessing the Siren Seductress horror, but because I'd done the Muse before, I was able to access it more and push open. And I love that, because this book is all about the Muse level, and we've talked so much about level 4, and then you do the Muses, but what you're really showing us is, once you've done it, it's part of your tool belt, and it's going to come in the future. It doesn't have to be just when you're focusing on the Muse level.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love that.
The levels they all build on each other. It's beautiful to see how it builds on the level. Each level builds on the levels below it.
I love that.
So the other thing that I'd really like to say as well is, like, so just moving on to the book itself. There are some people, like Jenny had already published some work before, but this is one of the things that I absolutely love about doing these collaboration books, because, like Neha said and Sam's alluded to, it's a safe place to do that. And one of the things I absolutely love is seeing how people, I kind of knew right from the beginning that Neha probably wouldn't be anonymous, but I wasn't going to push it, because I know that what happens is people step into it themselves through this whole process. So try and make it as easy as possible for people to be able to do that.
I love it, because I feel like it's like an opening. Do you know, like it's almost like an opening of a blossom, like people are just tentative and then just open and out there and just proud to have their work out there and exist with this whole concept of unattachment. It just is. And so I love how this book obviously represents Muse writing, represents the fourth level of Jules's program, but represents so much more in the journey of writers to acknowledge their art and share it openly with the world.
Yeah. And it's a brilliant first step. For people who are nervous about it. We saw it, Usha's clapping she was in the first book, we were in the first book together. It's a really lovely way to make that first step out into the publishing world.
I love it. Thank you. So I have some comments to share, and then I want to open it up to questions too. Miriam had to go, but she said, I wanted to send this to everyone. Thank you so much. From a novice, I especially thank Jennie, my friend and teacher. I look forward to hear readings. She had another appointment. Keep writing, ladies. You're an inspiration for me. So that was really sweet.
Lovely. That's really nice.
Usha chimed in to say she loves the honesty of today's conversation. Thank you, Usha. I don't know if anyone has any questions, because I can always keep going because I find everyone here so fascinating.
I'll say something just as I was listening to Sam and Rhea, part of this coming out of the shell is the process versus product. Process I was comfortable in and safe, and it's like I can do this for the rest of my life. Process, and like Rhea said, that is always going to be part of honing the craft. But product is what frightened me so much and put all this stress on it. And this, as Rhea said, was such a gentle way to move from process to product without pressure, with like somebody else kind of holding the reins of the clarity of what's going to be published. Just working on our own individual pieces to get them polished to product, coming from process. There was something really powerful of just seeing how organic that can be, rather than product. This is what I'm going to create. Now let me sit down and write and create it. For me, that's still a stretch. If that makes sense. It's like this was such a lovely way of seeing that product can come very organically from just trusting the flow of process.
I love that.
Yeah, I could echo that and just say that I wouldn't have come to the publication part of this without the incredible support and humanity and universality, like when somebody mentioned kind of needing each other. I think Rhea, when you were talking about in the writing, but there's this humanity that comes through. And as far as the product goes, so the process was always about that humanity. The product looked like it was about me a lot, right? Like it was like my writing and me being out in the world but when I hold that book in my hands and I read it and I fall in love with every person in that class, every piece I read, it is so moving to me. And they're all speaking of this humanity. They're all speaking of this universality that like, oh yeah, I feel that too. And I was really struck by that, to be a part of something that I can hold in my hands and realize that's another heart that I know, and that's another heart that I know, and and I've been in class with these people every day, and here it is, and I can savor it. That's been incredibly special.
That's beautiful. Jennie, yeah?
Yeah, just to elaborate on that, I think this is so important for new writers that are exploring their process in method writing, to have the opportunity to see how you take process into product in a safe, supportive environment. It's such a big step. but that is writing. Writing is rewriting, but you have to start with the process. And that's where the creative genius comes out. So this gives every bit of the writer's world. And those pieces that we read in class are not ready to be published. They're just not. And you know, to be able to, those that take this dare and this challenge to learn that process, I think is so important on all levels.
Awesome. Neha, you're going to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, just following on that, as Jennie said that, it's so true. I feel like a stronger writer, having gone through this process of turning process into product. I don't know, it's very subtle, it's underneath it, but I can tell it changes even how I approach process. Like there's growth as a writer that definitely happened over the course of this past year, not by writing more, but as Jennie, those words, writing is rewriting, by rewriting and looking at the same piece over and over and over again until I almost forgot what it was like. What? Like there was something in that journey, I think, that has helped me grow as a writer. In addition to everything else we've talked about, of the confidence of just being willing to put my voice out in the world through this very safe, gentle process. But there's growth as a writer by going through rewriting, editing, and putting it out there.
Mm. And, you know, Karen just pinged us. So, you know, you're talking about the gift of the book for your own experience, but it's a gift for, so Karen talks about a gift. This is a gift for the newbies in method writing, to have such clear examples of method writing exercises in these books. And, you know, she's so inspired by the class. So not only are the writers having this amazing experience, but then through this outreach, through these calls, through the recordings, through the readings, it's like all these next, you know, the people who just are not even at Muses yet have kind of a pathway for them to see how to create, you know, product from all the process we do in class. So it's beautiful.
Can I just add to that as well, Jamie? I really hope that, you know, this isn't the last of the method writing books that we're going to do with Jules. I really hope that by people who are doing method writing at the minute, seeing these interviews, it will make it so much easier for them to say yes when the opportunity presents itself to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so off the back of that, what are the next ones? Do you know?
I have an idea in mind, but I haven't run it past Jules yet. So
okay. All right. So that's just a teaser for everyone. Well, we are just 1 minute before the hour. So again, for everyone to, you know, buy a book. If you've read the book, hopefully you have at this point, please leave an Amazon review. And there are going to be some potential readings in the future, Rhea, maybe? Or other people are doing some readings, I think.
Neha and Jennie, you were going to do one, aren't you?
Yeah.
So on August 21st, it's a Sunday from 2 to 3:30, the Poetry Salon, which is Tricia Hefner runs, and she is hosting a reading with 4 of the authors. Or is that right? 4? Me, Neha, Mare, and Vanessa. Awesome. So we're going to be reading poetry, and then she'll have an open mic with her people that come on. So excellent. We'll actually get to read some pieces. Nice. I'm trying to think of how I can get that info to you. Rhea, you get my newsletter, right? So it'll be on there.
Yeah, we'll get it shared. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for sharing this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. And I really appreciate your time. And thank you to all the authors for coming and speaking with me and being so honest and authentic in your answers. It was a really good conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Rhea.
Thank you.